Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. With the transfer portal largely winding down, you're starting to get a little bit more of a clear picture in terms of what these teams in depth charts are going to look like heading into spring practice, fall camp, in the 2024 season, taking a deep dive into this Oregon offensive line that was, quite frankly, very good in 2023, and I think can be even better in 2024 with who they have coming back. Taking a look at the Oregon offensive line this Wednesday. Next Wednesday, we're taking a look at the Oregon defensive line, a position group that I am extremely excited to dig into. Dan Lanning, building through the trenches at a very high level, makes you feel good about where you're going in the Big Ten in 2024. Excited to get into this one. Before we do, just want to say thank you to you guys and a special shout out to the Oregon Duck fans. I mean, this has been a program that's been a blast to talk about over the last couple of weeks with all the transfer portal commitments, the amount of support, the amount of Go Ducks in the comment section. That stuff means the world to the boys. Cannot thank you guys enough for all the support you guys have shown. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. More importantly, especially when it comes to these deep dives, we go back, watch the games, look at the numbers. We would love to hear from you guys. We learn a ton from you guys. We have some phenomenal conversations in the comment section. Would love to hear some names that we might be sleeping on that you guys want to shout out in the comment section. Appreciate you guys rocking with the boys. Dill, going to give you the T-box. An Oregon offensive line that was great in 2023. How are we feeling about 2024?
I mean, honestly, I think the biggest news for them all year is getting a Johnny Cornelius back. I think when you look, I don't even know if he got the attention he deserved in terms of like people being like, man, I think this is a first-round tackle. I mean, very polished in the pass, very powerful in the run. So to get him back, along with that left side, which was a younger group, and I think you saw get better and better over the course of the season, I think you got to be really excited about your returning.
That's what excites me the most. You take a look at this Oregon offensive line in 2023. It was an elite group, right? This Oregon offensive line, they averaged 5.5 yards per carry. That was fifth in the country. Bo Nix only got sacked on 1% of his dropbacks. That was number one in the country. And I think two things that really stand out is, one, I think there's still some meat left on the bone. I think, why did a Johnny Cornelius come back? He wants to be a first-round NFL draft pick. Josh Conley Jr. on the left side is going into his third year of college football, got his first year of starting reps under his belt. I mean, it's crazy to say because this group was so good in 2023. I think it's a group that can get better in 2024. And the other thing that stuck out to me, looking at the numbers, going back and watching some of these games, it's rare to have an offensive line that is so complete in both aspects in terms of running the football and in pass pro, right? You look at this Oregon team, 5.5 yards per carry, fifth in the country, moving bodies off the line of scrimmage, road graders on the offensive line. But you normally see with a lot of different college football offensive lines, if they're road grading, you might struggle in pass pro a little bit. No, this Oregon offensive line was also very good in pass pro. So both boxes you're checking, this team can move the ball or move bodies off the line of scrimmage and run the football, but also really good in pass pro. I mean, that's probably what excites me the most heading into 2024 here.
Well, and yeah, that's led by, again, two tackles who have very much NFL skill sets. I mean, very good athletes for their size, very strong, very powerful, very explosive. Like, those two have the traits. When you just look at them, you're like, well, these guys should be high-level pros. I mean, yes. Connerly, you saw how much better he got over the course of the year. I think that was like one of the bigger things I noticed.
Agreed.
I think we were talking like, man, he's not playing great in the past for those first couple games. I feel like he took some penalties, didn't look as like sure of himself. But then by the end, when you go watch those Washington games and into the big or Pac-12 championship game, looked really, really sound, looked confident, was moving quicker. You just kind of like, again, once he got his feet under him, you started to see that like 5-star talent really shine. And I thought he had a really nice close to the year. And that's what I think you're looking for as the biggest thing is, especially on that left side, you had two younger guys, I'd say, obviously, in Harper and Connerly. I think if those two really start playing together at a really high level or kind of playing as well as they can together in working those combo blocks and sticking together on their double teams, I think that's the side that can take a monster step forward. And if they do, I think that, like, I don't know how you attack this offensive line, because Cornelius, in my mind, I mean, he's a finished product. Almost.
Yeah, I think I don't know if we could. When's the last time we've talked about two first-round NFL draft picks on the same offensive line at the tackle position? And I think that's a strong reality we're looking at 12 months from now when Josh Conley Jr. and a guy like a Johnny Cornelius maybe heading to the NFL draft, that's probably the conversation we might be having. Dill, you look at these tackles, and I think that's what's most special is you look across the Power 5 conference, or Power 5 conferences, I should say, and Power 5 teams. All these programs are trying to go out into the transfer portal and grab starting caliber tackles, right? It's a hot commodity. And Dan Lanning and the Oregon Ducks are sitting back saying, we have 2 tackles and a Johnny Cornelius who faced over 540 pass pro opportunities, gave up 11 pressures. Then Josh Conley Jr., 540 pass pro opportunities, only 17 pressures. So you have 2 starting buck-end tackles that you feel really good about. And then moving to the inside, you lose a guy like Powers Johnson, which hurts, right? That is I was one of, if not the best centers in the country last year. Going back and watching that Liberty film, I mean, they call him Poncho. He is a guy that I think comes in and seamlessly takes over that starting center spot. That dude, I think, is a stud.
And you saw some moments from him all year. I think he played a little bit in that Pac-12 title game, a little bit against USC. And again, as much as it hurts losing Powers Johnson, I mean, Poncho's got that, that physically imposing style about him that I just think is very unique. I mean, built as wide as you can be as an offensive line before it gets ridiculous.
Fire hydrant.
Really, really powerful, moving guys off the ball. And again, that's the one thing you're kind of Oregon did a really good job setting the tone. I think when you have him in the middle, he gives you a bit of a different element. Again, you lose some of the experience from Powers Johnson for sure, but I'm not sure he's got the physical traits that Poncho has.
And Poncho is a guy that is a phenomenal athlete too. When you ask him to be in pass pro and work in space, I mean, the feet are phenomenal. Again, you keep reminding yourself he's not built like a true freshman. That's a true freshman out there playing, and that's probably what was most impressive to me. You take a look at a guy like Marcus Harper, you're hoping to see him take some steps, again, optimistic about what he can do. And the last maybe question you have is, all right, who's plugging in at the other guard spot? And you go out and get a guy in Matthew Bedford who, coming from Indiana, has 2 years of starting experience, has played over 1,500 snaps for Indiana coming from the Big Ten, a guy that has played a ton of right guard for Indiana as well as kicked around a tackle, a guy that can play tackle in a pinch. Dill, you look at the 5 starters on this Oregon offensive line, and you start feeling really good. Now, the one question I have, and this is where I would like to have the conversation with the Oregon fans in the comment section. When I look at this team, I love the 5 starters that you have. My question is the depth of this Oregon team, because you look at what Oregon wants to do, right? Winning a Big Ten title, winning the college football playoffs, winning the national championship. If you can get through the season with your 5 starters staying healthy, that's massive. Oregon stayed healthy on the offensive line for the most part in 2023. My question is, what does the depth look like on this Oregon offensive line? Because it sounds like Oregon will be relying on some young cats to kind of be that 6, 7, 8 on the offensive line.
And frankly, that's the hard part. How do you evaluate the depth of a team when everybody played all the time? I mean, the only guy who really worked in it felt like was Poncho a little bit, but for the most part, that was a very healthy unit and a very good unit. So you just didn't really get to see the backups. So again, it's like the Schrodinger's cat argument. How do you know if it's good or not? It's you don't know until you kind of get to play them. So again, it's do we know that they have good depth? I guess not, but it's we also don't know that they don't have good depth. So that'll be the interesting question at the end of the day. I don't think it's answerable because we just haven't seen.
And we have this conversation a lot. How can you get maybe a feel for what the Oregon depth is? I think you get a feel for how many offensive linemen did Oregon take in the transfer portal. I mean, they went out and grabbed a kind of blue chip, very solid starter in Matthew Bedford, but outside of that, they didn't take any offensive linemen. So what does that tell you about how Dan Lanning maybe see an Alik Terry? By the way, shout out to Alik Terry. It took me 9 minutes to talk about him. Phenomenal offensive line coach, Wake Forest alum. Shout out the boys. I think Alik Terry, talk about rising stars in college football. Alik Terry's one of them, has done a phenomenal job with this group. But Dill, getting back to my point, got a little sidetracked. You can tell how college coaches view their position groups on their activity in the transfer portal. For example, we had the conversation with USC the other day. They go out and grab, 6 guys to fill in the secondary? What does that tell you? Lincoln Riley sees that USC secondary not very good from what they had in 2023. Wanted to address it. Oregon, they go out and grab a guy in Matthew Bedford who they flipped from Colorado as their only offensive lineman. It didn't even sound like they were going after many offensive linemen in the portal. So, I mean, you don't know what you have because we haven't seen it with our 2 eyes. But reading the tea leaves and reading Dan Lanning's actions, you probably feel pretty good about what you have as depth on that offensive line because they didn't take any other guys in the portal.
Because you're right. The only other guy I can think of them even targeting was Caden Green, and Caden Green wasn't like everybody is targeting Caden Green because Caden Green's like one of those odd transfer portal situations where he's – I mean, it was surprising that he was in there in the first place, and when you can go get in freshman All-American player, whatever his accolades were, I mean,
same thing we had with Evan Stewart. Like, did Oregon need to go out and get a wide receiver? Absolutely not. But you ain't gonna pass up on a guy like Evan Stewart if he's interested in coming into Eugene, and that's exactly.
But I think you're right. There were so many offensive linemen, no doubt, Oregon could have taken it, and they just really didn't make it a priority like they did some of the other positions, especially some of those secondary guys that they really wanted.
Now, a couple of young guys that I do want to just shout out before we kind of tie a bow on this conversation. Jaquan McRoy, absolute mountain coming in as a true freshman. You talk about a body that is physically ready to play as a true freshman. I mean, he's probably one of them. I think you might need to melt him down a little bit, do a little change to the body count, but from a physical trait standpoint, from how big he is, he's a guy that I could see maybe playing in a pinch if Oregon needs him. I know they feel good about Dave Luley on the inside. A couple other guys that played sparingly, but for us, kind of hard to comment on the depth because you haven't really seen some of those backups come in and play significant reps. So we'll see about that. That's probably the only question. But, Dill, when you look at the starting five, the projected starting five, you start feeling pretty good about what Oregon has on that offensive line. And, I mean, Dill, to tie a bow on it, I guess, this is a group that we're Michigan fans. You take a look at Oregon coming into the Big Ten, and this is going to be one of the premier contenders for this conference immediately in 2024. Really like what they're doing on both sides of the line of scrimmage. We'll talk about the defensive line next Wednesday. Cannot wait to get into that group. Appreciate you guys rocking with the boys again. Would love to hear from you guys in the comment section. Best part about doing this is really talking ball with you guys. Can't thank you all enough for all the support. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.